managed care is pushing them out the hospital much faster. And so it's no longer the walk-in with the cane, type of nursing homes. We're no longer a nursing home. I say that, we are we're a mini hospital.
The term that keeps popping up these days that I'm hearing is health span. We talk a lot about lifespan, now we're talking about health span.
I don't want you to look at me as a cost center. What do I need to do?
And in any building I go to, I had to look at what's the need of the area. Let's go talk to the hospitals. What's the difficult? Because we know that everything is going to managed care. I believe in celebration. I have nurses that will work for me and will not go down the street for $1 or $2.
Inside the industry, there's more psychiatric patients than ever. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to handle that?
And so these people are not coming because the building is beautiful. They're coming because of the people in the building. And that's what I try to tell my team. We sell the building. The building doesn't sell itself.
All right, welcome to Our Purpose Podcast, the podcast where stories from skilled nursing come to life. I'm your co-host, Kip Kruger, a voice shaped by industry experience and a belief that everyone's story has a purpose and it's worth telling. We got an exciting new virtual episode coming out to you today. First, I'd like to introduce James Dieter, Chris Light. What's up, fellas?
What's going on?
What's up, Kip?
Glad you are joining us today. My friend is going to join us as well, too. She's the special guest that we have coming on today. She is a world traveler. She is an administrator who holds a master's degree. She's been an administrator for 12 years, been a preceptor for 10 years, runs Richardson Nursing Rehab in Richardson, Texas, big building. Miss Sheila Foster, it's good to see you. Sorry.
How you doing, Kip?
We are happy. We are happy to see you. We're happy that you're on the Our Purpose podcast with us. Let's jump into it real quick. What got you into skilled nursing?
Well, I feel like I was born into skilled nursing. My mother was an LVN who worked nursing homes. My father was in the military, so when we did a lot of traveling, she found herself in every kind of role. When we went overseas, she can always find a home in a nursing home as a job. And so back then, when nursing homes were really nursing homes, she would bring me to the nursing home around all the elderly. I would help with activities and things like that. So I always just had a love for the elder. And so I just found my why back then, and I just knew when I got of age, I would find my way back into the industry some type of way.
Well, you certainly found your way back into the industry. You've held an AIT position. You help administrators learn their way and find their way into the facility. How many people have you precepted so far?
So I have been a preceptor for about 10 years. So I've precepted anywhere between 10 to 12 people in this industry. Me being a nurse by trade, started off as an LVN and got into nursing home administration. I've been able to educate on all different types of levels, from clinical levels. So I think being a preceptor was just my next role, because we know as an administrator, you have to know everything about the business. So I always put my different hats on. And about 10 to 12 people I have in my 10 years, I've been able to help become administrators.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. Hey, James, give me some insight on wearing different hats inside the industry. You've been a nurse practitioner. You're now a CEO of Principal Health System. Talk to me, James, about having different roles, just like Sheila has had different roles in her career.
Yeah, I mean, it's all a balance, right? So as Sheila knows, and bringing people up too. I mean, being a preceptor and training, that's a big part of leadership. And understanding how it all fits together. I think within my role, being patient-centered has always been probably the paramount theme. Whether it was, I've run in circles in laboratories, surgery centers, pharmacy, neurodiagnostic facilities, etc. And to wear all the different hats is challenging. But you got to make time for what's most important. You got to make time for the family. You got to make time for the people that you work around and work with. And most importantly, when you walk in the room and you're patient facing, you're on stage. And having that on stage appearance and on stage state of mind as to, it doesn't matter what's going on and how stressful the thing was from the other room you walked out of. You know, it's funny when you wear multiple hats, you sometimes walk out of a very stressful situation that has nothing to do with the front of the house. But you gotta put on the face, and you gotta just, it's somebody else is going through a hard time. So you gotta show up for them, and you gotta put on your best face.
Yep.
Yes.
Share some light on me, with me on this, Chris. Talk to me about, leading different groups of people, and with your experience, bringing people up inside the ranks, and encouraging them and getting the best out of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really incredible what you're doing, Sheila. It's like offering to do these preceptor trainings and bringing people up, which the industry needs that, right? And people want to grow, and you're a huge part of that for those people, and they'll never forget what you've helped them achieve, right? And that mentorship is it's amazing, and it's really important. And I'm certain that you see it amongst your team, and people really view you as this real mentor who can help them get to where they want to be, right? And so from a leadership perspective, that's a lot of what we focus on is building people, so to speak, so that we can help them achieve more than sometimes they believe, or that we can just be part of their journey on the way to help them get there, right? I think that's really awesome that you're doing that.
Yes. I would probably say some of my biggest challenges in being a preceptor is, I always put people in two different categories when I'm doing a preceptor. I have a category that people who actually come from the industry, they used to be a CNA, they used to be a nurse, they used to be a business office, which is very popular, or a social worker. So I have that category. But then I have the category of people who've never worked in the industry.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that's a whole different type of AIT. They come in guns ablaze, like, oh, I'm about to save the world. I'm about to be the best administrator. I'm going to take care of my patients. I'm going to make money. And those are the ones I really have to step back sometimes and give them a reality check. And, and I typically start those off in the kitchen or in housekeeping when I'm a preceptor. I want you to go, hey, your next couple of weeks, come in here with some scrubs on, come in here with some regular clothes on. You're going to be doing housekeeping for a couple of weeks. And that kind of slows them down right there. And they kind of understand, okay, this is not what I thought. I'm still, if they last through that round, then I know they're typically a keeper. But yeah, I have two different categories of people that come to me for I can precept.
What an incredible perspective that you hold to people who have had industry experience and who do not have industry experience. What made you do that? What made you think that way?
Well, being being an LVN first, I feel like I moved my way from from a position of, clinical and then into operations. But what I do learn in being an operator, you have to know everything about the facility, and you have to be able to relate to everybody in the facility. It's just not your leaders in the facility, but from your housekeeping staff to your CNAs. And so when people typically want to be a nursing home administrator that's never worked in the industry, I find that they have a degree that they cannot use anywhere else a lot of times. And so they want to say, well, what can I do with this bachelor's degree? And then they think it's just this lot of money that they're going to get in this industry, and overnight they're going to make a lot of money, and they're just going to be running a company. And so we know that being an administrator in skilled nursing is nothing like that. You are dealing with people's lives. You're dealing with a team of, typically anywhere between 50 to 100 people. And you have to understand what it takes, because sometimes you may have to end up in the kitchen. Sometimes you may have to end up in housekeeping. So when there are people that don't have that back and they don't understand it, and they have this other concept, I've developed just a way to say, hey, you're going to start here. This is where you're going to start off. I need you to go in a room, and I need you to clean up a room. And the things that they learn from just going in and clean up a patient's room, maybe seeing a diaper that they've never experienced, seeing something like that, maybe seeing a meal, or seeing somebody, somebody complaining in the room just from being a housekeeper, going into the kitchen and seeing what it takes to, prepare that many meals, people going back and forth, washing dishes, how it humbles somebody. So I just felt like if you have never been in the industry, my best way to train you, to make you know, is this is what you want to do, because some days you may have to do this. Is this what you want? And if they can get through that stage, Typically, I've had some that did that and said, well, this is not what I signed up to do. I have a bachelor's degree. This is not what I signed. I didn't go to college to wash dishes. And that's when I have to have a reality check with them. Being an administrator it combines all of those skills.
You speak to really a leadership skill there, Sheila. So it brought me back, and really early on in my career, I was working in orthopedics as a nurse practitioner, and there was a physician that I worked with, and we were doing surgery over at a local, kind of a community-based hospital, maybe 75 bed hospital. And I will never forget, we were doing a tour of the operating room, right? We were going to start operating there. And the CEO was putting the tour on for us. And this guy stopped probably 5 times on the tour and picked up trash. As he's talking to us, he'd bend over and pick up trash off the ground and walk and I was sitting there thinking, like, this is my first real experience. This guy's a chief executive officer of a fairly good sized hospital, and he's picking up trash every time he sees it on the ground. And that was one of the most impactful lessons. He never said a word, but it was, you pay attention, that's those lessons that people watch the leader and how they behave, but understanding that nobody's above it. We do the dishes, we take out the trash, you gotta do what you gotta do. And I think people really gravitate towards leaders.
I was going to say, we talked about in a previous episode about bringing people in from outside the industry. And so you just kind of really dovetailed into that with having preceptors who were within and without of the industry. So I'm curious, kind of like a 2-part question here. I'm mostly curious, how many people have not made it through or kind of figured out it wasn't for them? It's obviously a big job. And then just your kind of own anecdotal experience on putting administrators through who don't come in with any preconceived notions versus, an LVN who did it for 12 years or make up the number of years. And I'm just curious on kind of your thoughts on both.
Well, I've had probably, I would say out of 12 that I've probably precepted, I've probably had 2 that realized this wasn't for them. One had a background of being a manager of retail, I think ran a few Dollar General stores. He struggled, he struggled. He thought it was a sit-down job. And anybody that knows me as a preceptor, again, that's the last place that you will, is sit down with me, because I'm not a sit-down type of leader. I'm constantly rounding. I'm the one who picks up the trash. I'm that leader. And so he did struggle because he did, and his comment was, I didn't think this is what, you can't pay me enough to do this job, and I'm looking like, yeah. I said, well, here's the first problem. You can't be in this job for the pay. So that was a reality check for him. I said, you will never make enough money to do this job. And so he quickly, I think I put him in a building for a little while, just to help, because I was a senior at the time, and he didn't last a week. He didn't last a week. And so that was one that he just said, this wasn't for me, and then I had one that, decided to be a preceptor. I think their background, if I can remember what their background was, but they worked a little in retail also, worked at Walmart, was able to move themselves up very quickly at Walmart, had a degree that didn't make the salary that they wanted to, being a manager of a Walmart at the time. I think they were assistant manager or something. Thought healthcare, because they see a lot of elderly people come through Walmart, and they felt like they had this knack. And so they went back to school to take their domains and just thought they would be able to save the world, and they were going to get a lot of elderly people coming in. And then I think we had a behavior patient that was screaming and throwing urine. And I said, hey, go down there and help the nurses with this patient. And they looked at me and said, they're throwing urine. I said, I know. I said, your nurses are in there handling the patient. I need you to go down there and, what would you do in this situation? And didn't show back up the next day.
He's like, I'm going to go back to Walmart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Did not show back up the next day. And that is just the reality of it. And I think, I don't know many other preceptors, but I do think at times, if we don't give people in this industry the real about it, the real, you're going to have behaviors, you're going to have a younger, you have to, when they're precepting and learning the business, you're going to have to give them a reality check of what we really do. We don't just sit behind a desk. And those that I find that do that all day are probably the ones that are not most successful. But, we are out there and we deal with a lot of different real life situations in skilled nursing. We don't just deal with geriatric patients. We deal with patients. I have had patients as young as 21, at my facility. And so, I think that Tarrant County has an administrative program, and I was privy once to speak to that program. And I just was, spoke very truthful about the industry, and they asked me about it. I don't know if any of their students came back after my conversation, but, I always ended that it's very rewarding. But, if you're in it for the money, this is not the industry for you.
Sheila, that's probably like one of the best things you could do in hiring, right there, what you just did. We try to talk to our leaders about that all the time. Is like, if we oversell an opportunity, you get into this 3 weeks later and like, this is not what I thought it was. And so kind of telling someone the plain hard truth, just being honest, like I've had a lot of conversations, as I'm sure very clear you have as well. It's like, hey, this job is really hard. This is what's hard about it. Let me tell you about it. Are you sure you still want to do this? Are you positive? And you can get that kind of buy-in. I'm sure you're quite good at that. And that's really funny that you did that at the class.
Yes.
Sheila, did you know Princess Jackson?
I did know
Did you
Princess
go
Jackson.
did you go through her classes?
I did not. My degree is in healthcare administration, so I did not have to take those domains. I only had to do 500 AIT hours because I was a nurse also. And so I think when I went through it, the administrator, because, I was basically already doing operations as a regional nurse, MDS regional nurse. And so I was teaching a lot of administrators how to make money. And so my positioning into this role was very easy for me because I'm a new business office. You work a lot with business office. You work a lot with director of rehab. I'm a nurse, so the clinical, which is probably 500 of your hours, need to be spent in your clinical. I already knew that role. I was a staffing coordinator before, assistant director of nursing, so I knew a lot of that. But I knew Princess because she would send people to me. She would ask me to come speak. And so I did know Princess very well. Yes.
She was an absolute just gem. And she echoes kind of the same sentiment that you were talking about. You were talking about leading by walking around, like leading your facility. I think that there's a lot of administrators that do think they can sit behind the desk, that they think that they can not get involved in patient care. They don't have to walk around. And I felt like I got into my groove as an administrator by walking around as much as I possibly could, because then I kind of got a good sense of the entire facility, the residents, the staff, kind of everything. Do you find that same challenge and joy by leading and by walking around and getting involved with your facility by being active?
Yes, I do. And you know me, Kip. So, when activities, I'm costume dressing, I'm the main, I was probably an activity director in my former life because that is one of the funnest things. I love to develop different activities. I like to participate in that. My clinical, one of the things with me when it comes to directors of nursing, I have always had the best luck with new directors of nursing. I've always had a little struggle with directors of nursing that have been in the industry a long time. So typically me as the type of administrator I am, I like to promote or give new director of nursing the opportunity to work with me. Because with me, you have to be able to evolve. You have to be able to learn. And when you're a new director of nursing, you're learning, you're evolving. Sometimes when you're an older director of nursing and you're working with an administrator like me, because I am in clinical a lot, because I do understand clinical, there's a lot of, headbutting, a lot of more old school vibe, with director of nursing and been director of nursing for a while. So I can honestly say in most of my buildings, with my style of leadership, where I'm very hands-on, the newer director of nursing, they like that better. They want my opinions, where some of the ones that have been in the industry really don't want my opinion. They don't, they're not privy to change. They don't want to accept patients that I say, well, give you a good example. If we know that, drugs is very common. Marijuana is a very common, it's common. It's legal in most states. You have a lot of patients that when you're reading their hospital records that say positive for marijuana, a lot of administrators or a lot of director of nursing say no, positive for drugs. Me, I'm like, well, what drug were they positive for? Okay. They say marijuana. I'm like, hey, you know, I'm like, bring them in. They're probably going to be the most, that's not a no for me. Most times it's probably a yes for me because they found a way to calm themselves down, so that's how you know, I always tease and everybody I talk to, I said, if they really legalize marijuana, I want to be the first nursing home because I'm a big advocate of that. I said, I want to be the first nursing home to have a garden, a weed garden, and to be able to allow residents. I guarantee you our dementia, our behaviors, a lot of
Yep.
things will go down. The
Yep.
appetites will, people wouldn't lose weight. So I'm a big advocate of that. So I tell, when I see drug usage or aggravated assault, my first thing, because you have a lot of patients with criminal backgrounds. My job is to protect the patients that I have in here. My first question as administrator was, who was the aggravated assault against? Was it a spouse? Was it you have to dig in deeper because everybody has a story. And so I'm that administrator because, that is willing to take risk. I'm willing to take risks. I lead by example. I'm on the floor. I tell patients, I tell my staff all the time, I tell my residents when they come here, I'm your biggest advocate. I have to make sure that you're taken care of. And I tell my staff that if I can do it, you should be able to do it. Answering call lights, we know that's always a major problem, in the nursing facility. I never pass up a call light, never. Would never. I teach my staff from housekeeping on. You answer a call light. Somebody could be in there choking, So I'm a leader. I'm one of those hands-on leader. And anybody has worked with me, that's probably been the reason why I have been successful in this industry is because I believe in being hands-on.
Sheila, I want to tie this back. So you mentioned how you worked in the business office and that you've trained administrators how to make money. And then now you mentioned that you're a little bit more willing to take risk and take on essentially a census, which drives revenue. What is the lowest hanging fruit? So when you look at an administrator, you look at a building, how do you look at it and go, okay, this is what we can do to drive revenue in this building? What do you teach these administrators how to make money in their buildings? That's really something that our listeners could benefit from hearing. What are a few things that you find are maybe commonly undone or something that can be done better?
Well, I can tell you every building that I have ran is, I got in the building because they were struggling. And so that's every building that I have been over is they hired me because the building was struggling. And so I've been able to turn the buildings around. Well, finances and census go hand in hand. And I typically, I want to say that because sometimes, we have people in beds, but we're not getting paid any money because they don't understand how to get paid money for them. So the first thing I do is, when I'm in a business, you want to look at the census. Okay. And so that's when I'm training about what I just talked about. What area are you in? Most of my buildings have been South Dallas area or Dallas County area. So in these areas, when you're struggling, you're going to have to be very open-minded to the type of resident that you take. And so I try to retrain them on how they look at a resident. Tell me about, what is the hospital's needs? For example, here we take bariatric patients. That's a need. This building is a one-star building, okay? I took it over, it was a one-star building. We were able to get a contract with United Healthcare because we take bariatric patients. And, so these are things that a lot of administrators are scared to do. And so when I decided to take on bariatric patients, of course, I had to look at, okay, how does this benefit the building? And this is retraining building. So, typically our bariatric patients are not, a lot of them are bed bound. They're not getting out of the bed. We have to make sure that we purchase the right equipment. So, we bought beds to make sure that the beds extend, that they can carry a certain weight. But this is the retraining that I do. I said, you're going to have to look at your hospitals and what's stuck at the hospitals. What do they need from the hospitals? So census is one. Yeah, census is one. And so when I got here, and in any building I go to, I had to look at what's the need of the area. Let's go talk to the hospitals. What's the difficult? Because we know that everything is going to managed care. And so you're able to get these contracts. People are so stuck on the star rating, but the star rating is not our problem. It's what we're able to take in our buildings to make these contracts and make these managed care companies say, hey, we're willing to give you a contract because these people are being stuck at the hospital and they don't want to pay what the hospital charges. And so, we're looking at, the trach patients. I make sure, and that's why I love new DONs a lot of times, because, they don't know what they don't know yet. Okay. So, so they're willing to say, yeah, let's bring that TP in if it makes sense. Let's willing to bring that trach patient in if we're able to train our nurses. So you have to look at different things. We have a great pulmonary program here. And so that's one thing, census is, of course, the number one thing. That's the first thing I teach, talk to with my AITs, and being very broad and looking at your needs, seeing what the hospital needs, and being able to say, find the yes instead of the no.
Yeah. Dude,
that's always been a big thing.
That's absolutely amazing. I want to double down on that just a little bit. So you said something that kind of gave me an aha moment. When you're walking into a facility that you may have a census problem or you may have some challenges there, the first thing that you go to is you go to the hospital and you ask them what patient is stuck here so that you can help them.
Exactly.
That's genius.
Exactly.
Give me some insight. Like why do you do that?
Well, because the hospital is who we're getting our patients from. They're going to work with you, because how many skilled nursing facilities are pulling from the hospitals? You may have one hospital. Just say I'm over here by Medical City of Dallas. They get visited by multiple skilled nursing facilities. So what is going to make you stand out? What makes you stand out? So we are able, like I said, a one-star building. I got this building, it was a one-star building. And so I had to find something that's going to make us stand out. Because they're getting visited, just like as an operator, we're getting visited by how many hospice companies, how many home health companies. What makes that hospice company stand out? So that's the same approach that I had to take when I take on a building. What do you need? What can I do to help you get those patients out of the hospital? And so many of them were getting stuck with the over 400-pound patients. Many of them get stuck with the trach that need dialysis, because we do know that dialysis centers, they struggle with that. So how can I make, that work for you? Many of them are getting stuck with the younger patients, psychiatric patients, people that have a history of drug abuse. So what can I do? What systems can I put in my building that we're being able to take care of these patients in a safe manner? And then the hospitals then are like, okay, well, let's work with you. Let's work with you. Let's see what we can do. And I was very proud when we got that And I have people calling me today, how did you get that contract in that one-star building with United Healthcare? That's how we got it. That's how we got it, as a one-star building.
You're taking on these patients that have a higher acuity. What does that look like on your side from an expense standpoint? I mean, obviously the care costs more to take care of these people. Were you being properly reimbursed? And do you believe now, with the changes in the payment model, PDPM, are you now in a position to get reimbursed properly for taking on a higher acuity patient?
And, a lot of people ask me that. And then I break the numbers down to them, because a lot of times we look at high acuity and we think that it costs more money. For the example with the bariatric patient, I bought a bed, I purchased a bed. We don't believe in renting around here. So that's a one-time cost, in the bed. Exactly. So we're purchasing the bed. And so then they look at, okay, well, how much staff do you need to move a bariatric patient? I purchased trapeze bars. Okay. Things that help them move. Typically your bariatric patient is going to be in the bed more than they are out of the bed. So the expense, and I'm getting higher reimbursement, especially on my managed care, because they're giving us an add-on. They're paying us more for these bariatric patients. Then when they do become long-term care patients, because the new PDPM model is very nursing driven, we get a very high amount. Right now, I would say we're running about a 200, which is not the highest, because we do have a lot of young. We're running about a 200 PPD on our Medicaid rate. One thing I've been able to do is, like you said, control expenses. The rentals, we don't do a lot of renting. That's one of the big expenses. My nursing, when it comes to my nursing wages and my nursing PPD, I've been able to develop a model that, hey, we have certain CNAs. We don't do it by, I think what hurts people, just say you have 80 people in your building. You want to divide your CNAs and you say, okay, 15 to this one, 15 to that one. We don't do that here. We have a higher acuity hall. We put 2 CNAs on that hall. We have a less acuity hall. We put 1 CNA on that hall. It doesn't matter if that CNA has 15 to 20 patients. It goes by the acuity. And I think we get stuck on how many people. But if I put a CNA on the hall with 15 patients and 5 of them are walking and talking, then you have another patient that has 15 patients and all 15 of them are bedridden. How fair is that? So we don't just go by numbers here. We actually go by, and so it's been able to have my nursing PPD lower when you would think it should be higher. because of these acuity patients. Bring it in, we have our nurses, we do the same thing. Hey, a nurse can have more on a hall where they're only walking and talking, where they don't need the higher acuity than my hall where I have more TPN or G tubers or things like that. So we just have to develop a different model of how we look at staffing. And so that's one thing. So my PPD has gone down with my higher acuity, which is they were they've been kind of shocked about that, but it has. I'm an analytical person, and I think I'm one that sits down and I look at the numbers. I like to play with the numbers to see how we can make money, because the business at the end of the day is about making money. But those are things that we have to think outside the box. One thing, with the staffing model, I have never used agency ever. Through COVID, since I've been administrator, I have never had to use agency. And I put my hat on, and I bow to that, because I hear horror stories about agency. And so people say, well, how is that possible, Sheila? How have you never, even through COVID, you've never used agency? And I said, because I developed a model with nursing that I listened to my nurses, first of all. I set the environment where the environment is a friendly environment. I believe in celebration. I have nurses that will work for me and will not go down the street for $1 or $2 because of the environment that I set, and we're so keen on money and, okay, well, I'm gonna pay this nurse, $1 more so I can keep her there. Where what does that dollar, do they ever really see that dollar? Of course we want to give evaluation, things like that, but it's the environment and the culture that we set in the building. I'm really known in the DFW for having a team of nurses that will follow me. I was in South Dallas, now I'm in Richardson, and I can tell you probably, I would say about 40% of my nursing team have worked with me before, have worked with me before. And so it's about setting a culture, it's about understanding the staffing model that is not about numbers. Yeah. And when we get away from a staffing model, it's about numbers and actually understanding, like you said, acuity, and putting the right people in the right places, then I think that solves a lot of problems, and it solves a lot of issues when it comes to operations.
Yeah, you talked about standing out, and making a difference in the space that you're in. Dude, James, I want to hear from you first, and Chris, I want to hear from you second, or vice versa. But you both had to endure that a little bit. There's many lab companies and X-ray companies out there. When you developed Principal and you talked about standing out, and you wanted to change the status quo and push the envelope a little bit on just sheer product, what kind of challenges and what kind of ideas did you have when you developed Principal to make Principal stand out?
Yeah, I think Chris will have similar answers. So Chris, go ahead and take it.
You could go on forever, but I think similar to you, Sheila, we experienced something a long time ago where we had trouble getting paid. And we discovered that we could get paid in long-term care. And, there's big box laboratories out there like LabCorp and Quest. We call them the big box players, right? And, they at that point in time, we didn't have any contracts, and we were like, well, we can't play on a non-level playing field. We weren't even on the field, right? And so in long-term care, we felt like we had a position on the field. And then we thought that we could then develop something, if things were equal, that we could be very competitive. And that has ultimately proved true thus far. And we've been on a really good run for the past several years. But we kind of had to ask that same question that you did, is like, I've got to adjust. Like, what can we do? Because what we're doing right now is a bunch of free work, right? I always joke and I say we're one of the most charitable organizations in there. I think almost all healthcare organizations are, because you do a lot of work that you ultimately don't get paid for. But I would say for sure that's probably how. And then ultimately, once you get there, it's very much a niche business for us. So we said, hey, we're going to be all in on long-term care. We're going to be all in on mobile, and let's develop specific products around that benefit folks like you, who are our ultimate customer, and working closely with you. And so it's trying to transfer that to the relationship from more of a partnership and saying, hey, what are your needs? And so, over the years, we've obviously launched some specific products and tools via software and things of that nature that a lot of our competitors don't have, but it's very focused on you. and it's trying to have this dialogue back and forth of like, how can we, I actually specifically one time asked a COO of a company, I'm like, how do we get out of your brain as a cost center? Like, I don't want you to look at me as a cost center. What do I need to do? And so having those type of conversations, which you're doing as well, right? So James, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but.
No, that was pretty good. We'll go on to the next question, Kip.
Well, and I can say, because I do use Principal, and one of the reasons, and Kip could tell you, is relationships. I think relationships play a big part. For example, every hospice company sells the same thing. They only can do so much. But it's the relationship that I have with that hospice company. If I have a problem, do I have somebody I can talk to directly? If I have some concerns, can we sit there? I want to feel like I'm a partner, at the end of the day. And that is something that Principal has been able to do because, Kip, I'm probably not, some people say I'm not the easiest person to work with because when I'm on a tantrum, when I'm looking at the money, when I'm diving down, I can be like, hey, look, wait, let's look at this. But if I could pick up the phone and call you and I can get you on the phone and say, this is my problem. Let's find a solution. And that is something that Principal has been able to do for me. I've had you guys in 2 of my buildings. I brought you into this building. You were in my building I had before here, but that's why, because of my relationship with Kip. And that probably is why you stand out for me, and I think that a relationship building is very key in this industry because you have so many home health, you have so many labs, you have so many x-ray companies. But if you're not building a relationship, and that brings me on to Eudora, the company that I work for right now, I had a lot of offers to come here. And I know, Kip, we were going to talk about, I just can't brag enough about this company. And I'm not saying it because I work here, okay? But this company here, Rob Reese is my area manager. And so if Rob gets to see this, he'll probably be smiling. I'll make sure.
Well, Sheila, hold on. I got to stop you there. I wanted to talk to you about Rob first, but go ahead.
Go ahead.
Rob is such a good dude. I'm glad you're heading that way.
Yes, Rob is awesome. Okay. And I met Rob when he was an administrator at Ensign. I was the regional MDS nurse there. Ensign was they were in Texas. I was able to bring some Medicaid expertise to the company. And I was able to train a lot of the administrators there on, about Medicaid and MDSs. So that's how I met Rob. And this was years ago. Rob moved up through the ranks and ended up here at Eudora. When I had left, was no longer with Cantex anymore. I was at a building to help, a smaller building, and to help this building to kind of pass their chow, if you're familiar with that. And Rob came to me and said, hey, I'm about to, get a building in Dallas. And I would love for you to run the building. And the first thing he said was, one of the reasons is because you are a networker. He said, you know a lot of people, the building struggles with staffing, and I know that is a problem that you can fix. And so in saying that, with Eudora, they allow the administrators, a partnership. It's not a corporate heavy build. We have different type of, corporations. We have some that are very corporate heavy. It kind of falls from the top down. At this company, it's not like that. The administrators run their building, and it's a partnership. They listen to us. We sign our own contracts. We make decisions based off of our building. If anybody's ever worked for me, I always say cookie cutter doesn't work. If you run a company as a cookie cutter company, and I know we have successful companies out there that are running it. Hey, they have the same systems, every building, and hooray. But I can tell you, a cookie cutter eventually is not going to work because every building is unique in some sort of way. And that's one thing Eudora has allowed their administrators to be able to run their buildings based off of their community and their administrators making the decisions. And I think going back to partnerships, they're allowing us to choose who we want to partner with. And that's big. I think that's huge.
Yeah, I think partnerships are so important. And I want to touch base on that just a little bit. Because I think from going from administrator space, it was all about relationships. It was all about partnerships. It was all about like helping others. And so when I transitioned out of that space, there was a lot of parallels that I see here. When I transitioned out of long-term care to Principal, they took a chance on me. They said, hey, this guy's never done this before. James, was one of the first guys that took a chance. Now Chris was super skeptical. He still is skeptical, and that's okay. But he's like, you know what? I don't know if this guy's gonna work out. But they did take a chance.
Sheila, he showed up to your podcast with a purple shirt.
That's pretty decent. It's all right. No, but I was saying, like, I think just the relationships are absolutely huge, and I hope that as an administrator, I was the same way. I hope that that anyone, like the staff members, family members, I hope they enjoyed working with me, right? And now I get to do it the other way around. Is I get to have a relationship with administrators, with regionals, with owners, and I hope they can say the same thing. Like, hey, it's really, really nice working with Kip, and really, really nice working with principal. Because if something happens or something goes wrong, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call him immediately and he's going to fix it. So it's super similar, and I see so many of the parallels here. Pretty cool.
Yes. And I can say too, I like that too, what you just said, Kip, about they took a chance on you, because that's something I strongly believe in. You know, to be able to grow this industry, you have to take a chance on people. Meaning, you know, it kind of goes back to when I said about, I like new director of nursing, you know, because they come in, they're ready. You know, marketers. I have a history of marketers that I have hired that were brand new marketers. You know, I don't hire industry marketers that have been in the industry for a long time, because typically they don't, it's hard for them to adjust. They go to the same people. I need somebody that, hey, tell me your ideas. What do you want to do? They come in with fresh ideas. You know, my marketer now, Daniel, I gave him his first marketing job in skilled nursing. He was a hospice marketer. When he walked into my building, I was just drawn to him. You know, and I would, you know, if I was drawn to him, I could imagine what he would do at the hospital. So I said, hey, let me get you over here to skilled nursing. Never been a skilled nursing marketer before, but that is what, you know, people is what sell. You know, people is what's going to help you. It's, you know, it's not, you know, hey, this company is great. You know, Endura's been around for this many years. Hey, send your family to Endura. You know, they don't what, you know. No, they want to send it because, hey, I met that administrator over there. The DON is wonderful. You know, this is an old building. I don't know if y'all had a chance. Kip knows. Our building is, oh my gosh, you probably have never, we have tubs in the rooms. That's how old it is, okay? We're in the middle of a remodel right now, but we're having to sell rooms that have carpet and tubs in the rooms, okay? And so these people are not coming because the building is beautiful. They're coming because of the people in the building. And that's what I try to tell my team. You know, we sell the building. You know, the building doesn't sell itself. And so I like the idea that you guys took a chance on Kip, because I think if more of us took a chance on for this industry to grow, we have to take a chance on promoting that CNA, you know, to a medical records person, promoting that ADON, helping them go back to school to get their RN. You know, James, as a nurse, you know that you may have LVNs that will make great directors of nurses if we invested in them. You know, promoting that CNA to an activity director, because she's the one on the hall, she's having fun with the residents, you know, things like that. That dietary aide that wants to, you know, that can cook and wants to learn about, you know, promoting those people. And that's something that I truly believe in this industry. And that's one reason I think that I have been very successful in team building and leadership, you know, and doing things like that. And that's one reason why, like I said, I am a preceptor. And that's one reason why I do enjoy doing that.
Nice. You know, you mentioned you're going through a remodel. That's currently going on? I'd love to hear about just some of the lessons learned. I'm sure there's some pain experienced in a remodel. I think for those of us that have done commercial remodels while operating clinics or surgery center and whatnot, it can be challenging. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yes, a remodel can be very challenging because, first of all, it's exciting because you're like, oh, I'm about to get all this new stuff. I have a new building. The excitement, you know, it dwindles. I'm still excited. Please, I'm getting excited. But some of the pointers I can tell you what I've learned about a remodel. First of all, let the state know what you're doing. Okay. Let the state know everything that you're doing and what you're going to change. Make sure that the state is involved in every process of the remodel, because you can fix the building up and they'll come in here and say, nope, you know, this is not going to work. All right. So make sure they're involved. Make sure that the city is involved. You know, in one of our stories, I can tell you, we were ready. We were about a month out, about to open. You know, we were ready to say, hey, to get the state over here. We had the city to come out and do an inspection. They found a few wires that they didn't feel like, should be there in the ceiling. Now we had did all the ceiling tile in the whole building. So we're currently have to take down all the ceiling tile and rewire all the wires. That is, it kept, our whole ceiling is down right now. Okay. So this has been it has been an experience. I know more about construction than I've ever wanted to know about construction. About living. We had the dining room completed. I noticed that it was kind of leaning to the side a little. After time, things settle because it's the old building. So we had to, after we put all the new flooring down and everything, we had to go back up and dig it all back up, and we had to level out the ground under it. So, make sure you have we have a great construction company. Great construction company. And so make sure you're hand on hand with them. The guy that's over at Alex, he's here every day. He's talking to me. He sends me updates every day because we're in it together. I think we're probably the best friends right now. But yeah, so some of the pointers is making sure the state knows what's going on, making sure the city is inspecting it every step of the way, not just when it's done. They need to come in here and say, hey, are we doing this correctly? Because we don't want to finish this project and you come back and tell us, oh, that's not what we need. So making sure that they're involved and making sure that you are involved with your construction company on what it's doing, and that you go down there yourself as an operator and make sure everything is being done, how you want it to be done. But yeah, I've learned a lot.
So your new construction is opening how many more beds?
So we are a 280 bed facility. And so on this side alone, I think it's 140 beds. And so some of our rooms will be private rooms, but we're still licensed for 280. And so this is just another half of the building. And once we're done with this half, we'll be working on going back and work on the other half of the building.
Wow. So you're going to flip all the residents from one side to the other side, renovate the other side, and then open up the other side.
Yes.
Dude, that's incredible.
Oh, you're doing a fixer-upper.
Yeah.
You need to get Joe and Kip, or who is it, Joe and Kip out there or whoever, and show the residents their new home.
Right. Hey, exactly. We even have a new, AI, we're using technology. Our call light system is the technology that AI brings to a building. We're getting on board with that. Our Wi-Fi, so something I've been able to do, we talk about controlling expenses. So, the old school nursing homes, they have the channels with direct TV, how they have all that going. I completely took that out of my building. Saved me $1,500 a month. We're Wi-Fi now. Every TV is a smart TV. I made sure on our new renovation that we put all smart TVs in, Roku, Vizios. We completely got rid of a cable bill that was costing me $1,500 a month. So it's things like that with technology that I think that where we need we have to look at the nursing home industry different. Most people are not even looking at TV anymore. They're on social media. Yeah, this is 70-year-olds, 60-year-olds. They're on YouTube. They would rather have a YouTube channel than to have a direct TV channel, a cable channel. And so that's something that I noticed with our population over here. And so we were completely took away cable. And all of our TVs are Wi-Fi, and that costs me nothing. Me nothing.
I want to know how you're gonna staff this new side of 120 more beds, and where are you gonna find these residents?
Well, so we're moving all the residents over. So we're moving all the staff over. So that would be no issue there, And so then when we do the other side, we're going to be very particular about what we want to do with that side, different programs that we want to put over there. Again, the need of whatever the community feels the need to. But I have never had an issue with staffing, Kip. Like I said, if we make it a program and things that that people want to work at, I get applications daily. I probably run one of the lowest overtime, so that tells you a lot. So, low overtime, great staffing model. And so I don't think I would have any problem, with staffing a 280 bed facility. I'm looking forward to it.
I know there's a pretty big push for locked units. I feel like there's also inside the industry, there's more psychiatric patients than ever. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to handle that? And talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I always tell people in this industry, your Medicaid patients is your bread and butter. Because our skill census is going to always, I've been at buildings where they've had a skill census of 30 patients, but as soon as those 30 patients are gone, you're struggling. Okay. So my belief is always, hey, you have to have a certain amount of your long-term Medicaid patients that you want to keep in a building, because that's your bread and butter. And if you can imagine, if you can make your budget based off of nothing but your long-term patients, then your skilled patients is just going to bring that extra on there. And so one of the ideas I do have, because the younger psychiatric population, we do not get paid a lot of money for that. Okay. That is one of the lowest PDPM rates that you get on a younger sect, but it's a need for it. And so one of the ideas I do have is I would love to have a different population, maybe my 50 and younger or my 40 and younger population, to have a side of that building where we can kind of look at activities totally different, maybe some game consoles, the program, you can imagine a TikTok, social media over there. I have a guy that's a DJ in my building. This is a true story on TikTok. He's a DJ, and he DJs. you know, but imagine running a facility that offers that, I have a psychiatric background. So my first job as an LVN was at, I don't know if everybody's heard of Whitfield Hospital in Mississippi. It's one of the largest psychiatric hospitals in Mississippi. And so that is who paid my way through LVN school. So I had to give them like 2 years. Okay. And so that's how I ended up in Jerry Psych. I start off in forensics, which is psych, the dangerous psych. And then I end up in Jerry Psych and end up in nursing home setting. But so just having that understanding of a psych patient, working really well with the great psych companies, I think they're easy to be managed. You do want to separate from the rest of the population. So I think that would be a great idea. A lot of people talk about the locked units, but in fairness, your locked units a lot of them are psychiatric units. You have a lot of them that are dementia related, because they wander a lot. But typically your Wonder Guards, working at, I ran Wonder Guard buildings, but a lot of your dementia units are basically psychiatric units, and so that would be something that we look to maybe put over there.
Well, I'd love to hear about just, you mentioned how the progression of skilled nursing and you're taking on all these higher acuity patients. I'm curious just your perspective on how overall nursing homes have changed. I look back when I started doing rounds in those facilities, and you made a point earlier, very early on in the program, you mentioned, I think you said back when they were nursing homes. I think you said. So, and that's was my experience was it used to be a place where relatively healthy, but elderly people needed to be cared for. And now you've got, GI tube, you've got PEG tube, you've got all these, there's facilities with patients that are intubated. So, how is that going to continue to change over time? What do you foresee the next 10 years looking like?
Well, people are living longer. For one, we have a population of people that are mentally living longer, but physically we have probably a sicker population. So I don't, that's so when I say that we're probably going to see a lot of people that are older but sicker. We do know with managed care they're pushing them out the hospital much faster. It's not like where it was with Medicare where, they come, they're in the hospital a little longer. Managed care is pushing them out the hospital much faster. And so it's no longer the walk-in with the cane, type of nursing homes. We're no longer a nursing home. I say that, we're a mini hospital. We're an LTAC. We're taking on the more aggressive wounds. We're taking on the more aggressive pulmonary patients. We're taking on the more aggressive, patients that need the dialysis. We're taking on those patients. So I see in the next 10 years, we are going to be the place that most of our hospitals are going to be sending the patients to very much sicker. And so we have to adapt. The word skilled is skilled nursing home. That's what we are. We're going to have to adapt to those changes. One thing, unfortunately, we've been able to, I think a lot of the industry has been able to adapt, but the reimbursement hasn't adapted with it. We need PT, OT, speech therapists. The speech therapist role goes from cognition to, to what they eat. We need more skilled nurses. We need nurses that we can provide the education for when they get here. If I'm talking about opening with more psychiatric patients, you need nurses to be trained in psychiatric. Treatment nurses are not the treatment nurses that when I started off, that you had a wound. Now we have wounds that are very aggressive. The infections that we have in the building, you have to have nurses that are willing to work with certain infections. I remember I joked a lot when HIV first came out and how we all kind of ran around and we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We were from head to toe. We were, now, HIV is not even talked of. It's not even something, you have HIV. Okay, we have an HIV patient. It's that's how we've evolved. When COVID first came out, now we get a COVID case there. We don't, it's just like having a flu. So the evolution of skilled nursing is coming, and it's in 10 years, I see a population of 70 to, I see a population from 20 to 80, from the 21-year-old to the 80-year-old, living among each other in a facility, long term. And you have to develop systems that is going to help from the age of 20 to the age of 80. Can you imagine that?
It's huge.
Got to be quite diverse in order to appeal to all those different types of people.
Yes. And if you want to make it, because hospitals, as you know, they're looking at your RTA rates. So once you get them, you have to be able to maintain them. So that is going to be something that's very interesting. Hopefully I'll be retired by then. and maybe doing podcasts and telling people how they should be taking care of them instead of actually doing it.
So I used to do rounds in orthopedics and interventional pain, and there was a trauma team, and I was part of this trauma team, and we would see, unfortunately, I took care of a lot of people that would have, I always remember the motorcycle accidents because those people would be with us for a year, 2 years in an acute care hospital. You would, we'd amputate a couple limbs, and then you take care of the skin grafts, and we'd treat them for years in acute care hospital. Now they're there for 20 days, 25 days. Where do you think they go? They're pushing these people out. As you said, managed care, they're not going to pay. They quit paying for it. And they're putting these folks that are quite acute on chronic injuries to go directly into the facilities, the long-term care facilities. And as you said, the term that keeps popping up these days that I'm hearing is health span. We used to talk a lot about lifespan. Now we talk about health span and how long, I love that you framed it that way. I'd never heard it, but you said we're mentally living longer, we're physically sicker. And so you start to look at all these different variables. We're mentally living longer, we're physically sicker, managed care is pushing them out of hospitals. And then let's talk about Texas in particular, in which they're saying the next 8 years, the amount of people, because of baby boomers and the influx of people moving away from the coast to Texas and Florida, we're going to have twice as many people in these types of facilities. It's going to be a very interesting next chapter of life in these long-term care facilities. And I think that you're really set up nicely to take care of it. You've really got, you built a great culture. You talked about how you've really modernized it. You give people autonomy to make their own decisions. I love what you're doing. I think you're going to be set up nicely, but you need to train more administrators. You're going to need a lot more help.
Yes. This is evolution. It's about evolving. I'm big on the evolution and evolving.
We talked about evolution quite a bit. Wrap it up for us, Sheila. Talk to me about the evolution of the administrator. If you're talking to an administrator and a new administrator walks into your building today, what 3 pieces of advice are you giving them for the philosophy of, hey, things are changing. Nursing homes will be different in 5 years. They'll be different in 10 years. What are you telling these new administrators now?
Think outside the box. That's my biggest, I've always been a big believer. Be a risk taker and think outside the box. Sometimes we talk ourselves out of ideas because it's always done a certain type of way. And we're afraid to think outside the box, to try something different. Everybody has ideas, but the difference between somebody who reacts on the ideas and somebody who keeps the idea a secret is a big difference. And so think outside the box. I tell new administrators, if you think something's going to work for your building, do it. Do it. If you have an idea, do it. If you think you can save money this way, do it. It's either going to work or it's going to fail. You just try again. So thinking outside the box, that's the best advice I always tell. Be a risk taker and think outside the box.
Dude, I love that. Thank you for sitting down and chatting with us today. You've been an absolute energy. You've been absolute really, really nice to talk to. Give me one thing. What drives Sheila? What's Sheila Foster's purpose in life as a long-term care administrator?
Well, what drives me is I have a passion for people. I just have a passion for people, and I know we all say this a lot, but I'm going to say this is going to sound really funny. I have 4 adult children, who one lives in Thailand, one lives in New York, one lives in Sioux Falls, up in Sioux Falls, one lives in Austin. Do I think that my children are going to come home to Texas when I get old and want to take care of me? Probably not. So I always say I'm working this industry to make it better, because I may end up in this industry, and that's not a bad thing. I want to believe that if I do end up here in this industry, that I will feel safe, that somebody paved the way to say I can come here and I can have me a little 4-ounce glass of wine, because I'm a new, this is what we had. I could have me an 8-ounce beer and it'd be okay. That my activities will not be just bingo every day. That somebody has thought enough to say, hey, we have a sports program, because I'm a big LeBron James fan. So we have some different, we have some different things. We have a movie theater that I have here in my building that you can go in and watch, movies anytime you want to, Netflix movie. Just somebody took enough time to evolve the industry. So when I do get there, that, hey, I'm gonna be the resident president council. I'll just tell you that right now. But when I do get there, it's gonna be a place that I feel comfortable, that I know that I can be at.
What a beautiful story. You are doing exactly your purpose in life, and you are creating an atmosphere that you want to live in. And how cool of a story is that you can give administrators advice and opinions and say, you know what, I want you to create this facility. And if you wouldn't live in this facility, do something different. If you would live in this facility, you're doing the right thing for them.
And that's how I start off every orientation, Kip. That's how I start off every orientation with our new employees. I said, I know none of you in here. I said, raise your hand if you think that you will live in a nursing home one day. Nobody raises their hand. Nobody. I said, well, let me tell you the reality of it. 80% of you sitting here will be in this nursing home, or be in a nursing home one day. And so when you go out there working, I want you to remember that.
Yep. Dude, make an impact, live with purpose, and create a facility that you would want to live at. What an absolutely cool story. I absolutely love that. Sheila, I told James and Chris, I was like, man, I got a great person to join the podcast. She's going to be really, really good. She's full of energy. She's got some really, really cool ideas. She's inclusive. She does some amazing, amazing things. So from Chris, James, and myself, I want to say thank you for joining Our Purpose podcast. It was wonderful sitting down and talking to you today.
Thank you so much. I enjoy it, and I'll see you around, Kip.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks everyone for listening to Our Purpose podcast. From every one of us, we say thank you for listening. Until next time. See you.